Hello. Just before we get started, I would like to say that this is just my opinion, that my opinion isn't the right opinion, just my opinion, and love to hear your opinion. And that's, I think, one reason that movies were made for us to connect. And that's what my channel's here for us to entertain and to connect. And I don't want to be one of those aggregators that can judge a movie's experience for you. If you find I might hate on a movie, that's also not why I'm here. This is just my opinion. And if you feel that I might hate on a movie, you can be safe and leave if you would like to, just to be safe. That's not what I'm here for. I'm not here to hate on a movie. But if you stayed, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Now on with the review. Hello, my name is Anthony, and this is my review of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and I will be reviewing each and every Star Wars Skywalker Saga movie, including the anthology films and the Clone Wars theatrical movie, as well as the show later. So, this was easily one of the most anticipated, if not the most anticipated movies of 1999, and I wasn't alive back in 1999, but my parents sure were, and they said that the anticipation of this movie was huge. Because of the story of Anakin's turn to the dark side and the friendship between Obi-Wan and Anakin and the fall of the Republic, which leads me to one of my pros, which is that it's the prequels. You may ask how that's a pro. Well, it's a new story. I find this movie has some pretty solid world building. You get to visit and explore a lot of cool, new, and exotic sets and locations that are really stunning to look at, which leads me to one of my cons, which is the fact that I don't think that the actors or actresses at times have the most amount of time to interact with what they're seeing or these beautiful sets and locations that they're watching. At times it could feel like spectacles for spectacle's sake, as some people have used as a term. It just feels like it makes the world around them and the characters sadly a bit muddled. Another thing is the acting sadly isn't the best. I feel like the acting could have improved in this movie. Partially is because of the dialogue, which sadly also I wasn't the biggest fan of. Just the fact of how some of the words sounded or the context that they were used in. So I wasn't the biggest fan of, sadly. As well as just the characters in general. I feel like they didn't have wants and needs, which are the building blocks of a good character and characters that you could relate to and interact with, and a character that you actually care about. Well, I just want to debrief and overview the concept of character arcs, because I believe that not every good movie needs to have a character arc. It's just that each character usually has a want and a needs, and usually halfway through the movie their want usually coexists with their need. Boom, character arc. But sometimes it works differently. Sometimes they explore the characters and their backstory and give reasons why we should root for them. Sadly, in this movie I don't feel like they had enough of that. I don't feel like some of the character interaction was the best, as well as the way some characters were used. It felt like, sadly, it could be skimmed over at times, which is very unfortunate, because I feel like there could have been a lot of character in this movie, especially, perhaps, Obi-Wan being jealous of Anakin, and then later realizing that, he could make friends with Anakin, or something, and basically that would give Obi-Wan an arc. I feel like this movie didn't exactly have an arc, which leads to the fact that when these emotional scenes happen, sadly, they aren't as impactful as they could be. Another problem that this has is, sadly, this movie doesn't have the most emotion. Especially, you can't exactly feel the most sympathetic for Anakin when he's being shared right there. And earlier, he was, when one of the commentators was announcing Anakin for the pod race, everyone's like, yay! I feel like they could have gone such a long way. For Sebulba, they're like, yay, he will win. And for Anakin, they're like, boo. I mean, there was a bit of that, but I don't think there was enough. So, at times, that leads me to a big flaw, which is sadly the pacing, the pacing at times could be a bit slow, partially because there were these big gaps between the action sequences and other action sequences, and sadly because the character interaction in between wasn't the most investing. Sadly, this whole middle act couldn't be the most enjoyable at certain times. And that's what I would say. Another thing that I have is related to the plot itself, which is that there's some pretty good world building, but I feel like the plot didn't carry the most or enough emotion to make an impactful plot that allowed you care about the characters or their wants and needs. If you want me to explore that a bit more, I feel like the plot just didn't carry enough weight, or even if it did, it should have been explored a bit more about perhaps Queen Amidala's people being suffering and how that impacts her. I feel like that didn't hit enough, and I feel like there wasn't enough of that, which is kind of sad. Another thing is I wasn't the biggest fan of the villains. Some of their lines that they said, I wasn't the biggest fan of as well. And as well as like these type of villains that these people would cut like down very easily. I wasn't the biggest fan of that. Another thing is some of the characters, such as one named Jar Jar, I wasn't the biggest fan of, partially because it could cause an inconsistency in the drama. And as I said earlier, some of the acting I feel like didn't fit the characters to carry enough weight. Again, I don't know if that was exactly the script or is the direction. Once again, as usual, the score here really shines. Of course it does. It's John Williams, and I'll do a soundtrack review of that later. I would say that the main highlights thus far, just to give kind of like a overview, would be Duel of the Fates and Anakin's theme. But sadly, I don't think this movie carried enough weight. The pacing was a bit slow. I didn't exactly like the dialogue or the character interaction, sadly. I sadly didn't feel there's enough emotion in the story or in the villains. Now let's go on another thing. Let's talk about the CGI. I know a lot of people say that this movie is full of CGI, which some people have debunked at times. I would say that at times it looks too clean, but I don't think it's clean that's problem. I feel like there isn't enough detail in certain elements, especially on the planet of Naboo in the final battle. Why I didn't exactly have the biggest problem with the fact that everything was so clean was partially due to the fact that this was before the fall of the Republic and everything was supposed to be so clean, and hopefully before, like, later in the movies, they'll explore everything become more grimy. Like, that shot right there, I feel like is very unfinished. That shot in the grass, sadly, I wasn't the biggest fan of. Yeah, so that's what I would say about the CGI. But the other problem that I have with the fact that even though it was like so clean, and even though I think that in the later movies they'll explore it a bit more, is the fact that this plot was largely centered around corruption on certain planets and politics. So I feel like that could muddle the whole perfect scenario a bit. I also wasn't the biggest fan of how some characters were used, especially Obi-Wan Kenobi during this Tatooine sequence, or Anakin in the final battle sequence. Let's talk a bit more about the inconsistency. The final battle, I feel, has a bit too much. There's a lightsaber fight, which is cool to look at, but sadly there isn't enough emotional weight. There's also another battle trying to capture this Viceroy. There's a battle with these droids, and there's also a space battle. So at times I could feel like the emotion was a bit inconsistent, because that fight right there, that was very goofy and very funny, I guess. But then the other fights were very emotional. I feel like there could have been an inconsistency in the weight. There's also nostalgia Most of it I didn't mind. I feel like at times there were quite a bit too much, and I also feel like at times it could feel like it was a bit too much at certain times, but I was mostly fine with it, just because this was the world before and the building of the friendship. Also, this another sad thing with the dialogue is I don't think that the dialogue portrayed enough friendship between, sadly, any characters, really, which is very unfortunate in my opinion. So another thing is, as I said earlier about these battle droids being sliced in half like easily, the problem with that is it doesn't feel like there's any stakes or tension at times. There is one particular good villain, but I don't think this good villain was in the movie nearly enough to make it impactful or good. There are some good sequences which are good to look at, and you can be entertained with this movie. And I would love if you love this movie. I would love to have a friendly debate with you. I feel like that's what movie was made for us to connect. Remember, this is just my opinion. My opinion isn't the right opinion. And as I said earlier, I'd love to hear your opinion. And I feel like movies were made to connect, and that's why I make these videos in the first place, actually, to connect. Again, I'm a huge fan of this franchise, I think, and I love the universe, and it's cool to look at, but if you look behind, sadly, I don't think it's the best movie, but there are some good sequences to look at. As a total, I would say I would give Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, a C-. I know other people have given this movie that grade, but I feel like it fits there. It's cool to look at in a few parts, but overall, sadly, wasn't the biggest fan of it. But that's just my take on it. Thanks, bye, see you later.